Hey guys, Sean here. So today we're going to be backlighting an original Game Boy DMG. The process that I'm going to be doing is to actually remove the LCD that's built into the motherboard completely from the motherboard using a product called ChipQuick. It just makes it a little bit easier and safer to remove the polarizer material so you don't damage the ribbon, because these are really fragile screens. In another video I might go over a full cap replacement, and then in maybe another separate video I might show how to do an RGB backlight. This was the one that has a touch sensor, so you can just touch it and it changes the color of the LEDs in the backlight. This was sent to me by RoarArc's Retro Corner. He also sent me all these caps for a full replacement set for a DMG. The caps on a DMG only last maybe about 30 years or so it's always a good idea to replace these anyway. But for now, this Game Boy seems to be in a good working condition, and I especially love this song. Anyway, this Game Boy seems to be in really good working order. The speaker works fine, the contrast works fine, the shell is in really good condition. I'm gonna go ahead and replace the lens with a glass one, just because it's a little bit nicer to have a glass lens. Just the clarity's a little bit better. I'm using a backlight panel from Handheld Legend, and this one comes with a resistor already built in, so you don't have to add. Some of them that don't have resistors built in, you have to add your own little resistor, like a little 100 ohm resistor. But this one you don't even have to worry about that. So it's pretty much just 2 wires attached to here, and then 2 wires to the motherboard. And then another, I'm going to also show how to Bivert it. This is a little Bivert chip with connections from Handheld Legends also. So, alright, let's get started. We're going to start by opening up the Game Boy. So when you remove the ribbon, just be really careful. Just pull straight down like that. These are a lot more fragile than a Game Boy Color. So pretty much all we need is this part for right now. And one really annoying thing about DMGs is how many screws they have. So there's the motherboard. I guess technically this is the daughter board. And just get everything out, because it's a good idea to always just clean it anyway when you have it open. Oops. And to remove the lens, this one's really, see, the adhesive is just already non-existent now. And just set this aside for now. I'm going to clean these later, but for now I'm going to just focus on the screen. First you want to remove these 2 screws here. And the first part we're going to focus on is this metal bar, and then we're going to focus on these pins here, removing those. This metal bar, if you look on the back here, just is a little, kind of like a big staple. And it's soldered mostly to one side here. So you can use something like this to kind of pry it up and get it out of there. So there's one side, and then let's just apply some flux right in here. Be generous with flux on these old, there you go. So just pull it out and set that aside. We'll put that back later. It just helps kind of hold down the pin, because these little pins right here, hold down the ribbon in this area, because these pins that attach right there are very fragile. So now this is going to lift off this way, and in order to do so we need to we're going to use this ChipQuick stuff, which comes with a very special type of flux. ChipQuick is designed to remove any kind of SMD chips and things. It's just like a really low melting point solder, so when you heat it up, it just stays liquid for like a really long time. So it gives you a lot of time to like lift, instead of like heating up one area and then by the time you get over here, this part's already hardened. This will allow you to like heat up the entire thing and stay liquid while you lift it all up. But you have to use their special flux that it comes with. It's really sticky and kind of difficult to work with. It's really just like corrosive, but we're gonna clean it up when we're done. So just apply it all over there, all over the pins, and I already have a little piece of Chip Quick here, so I'm just going to use this to on the pins and just rub it over them gently. And as it's rubbing back and forth, just start very gently lifting. You want to be extremely delicate with this ribbon here. And you can see it lifted just fine. You want to make sure you hold it for a little while it hardens, because this Chip Quick solder just stays liquid pretty much forever. Not forever, but a really, really long time. And if you just set it back down right away, it's going to harden together. So there, that's pretty good. Those are separated. It's really, really sticky, and see, I've got it all over my little pry tool here. So you're gonna keep everything as clean as possible. So now there's another set of pins on the inside behind the screen here. So what we want to do is lift up the screen this way, being very careful with this edge here. So the best way is to use one of these like pry tools again, and just kind of get under here, under the glass, and lift up very carefully, just like that. And there's these little like sticky pads. Just very carefully unstick that there. And the first part is mostly done. There's one more screw right here we need to remove. And then another set of pins. So again, just use the Chip Quick flux. Be generous with it. And I think here's a little tiny piece. That might be enough. So just kind of get it all over. And then apply your Chip Quick. Just kind of rub it back and forth. And very delicately lifting on the left side here. And there they go. I lift it off. So now the screen is completely removed. So now the next step, I'm going to set the screen aside for right now, and I'm going to thoroughly clean this the motherboard. So first off, I'm going to use some desoldering braid, and I'm just going to use this to clean up some of the Chip Quick flux that's left over here. So you just press that down and it soaks it right up. Because it's so low melting point, it just soaks it up immediately. And then same thing over here. I've poured some just regular isopropyl alcohol in this paint lid, and just get a nice clean Q-tip and really clean up all of that flux that's left over here. You feel it really sticky, and just kind of rotate your Q-tip as you clean. You can already see like how much of that gunk is on the end there. And don't be afraid to use a lot of the alcohol. So now we're going to set this aside to just dry out while we work on the screen. So when you pick up the screen, you want to be really careful not to grab it on this ribbon here. Just really this is the most fragile part of the whole thing. So let's first remove these little pads, and we're going to clean up the flux that was left over on here. The flux and the solder. So this is a lot more delicate of a procedure. And the worst thing that could happen is that one of these pins breaks or kind of bends out of place. It's pretty typical for it to bend out of place. You can kind of just bend it back, and when you resolder it to the board, it should most likely be okay. But just do your best to be really delicate, and always go and like pull in like this direction, or with this one you want to pull in this direction, because they're more firmly attached to this part, and this part's really fragile, like the edge. And again, down here, they're more firmly attached up here and less attached down here. So you just want to pull from the more attached to the less attached areas. But the sticky stuff is really, the sticky flux, you really don't want to get that anywhere else, because it's kind of hard to clean up, and especially if you got it like on the glass screen or anything like that. So just do your best to really clean as well as you can. Don't leave any of that sticky residue anywhere. We're going to clean it again once we resolder it to the board, because we're going to have to use flux again to attach it. But just for now, just clean it up as best you can, just so we don't get that sticky stuff everywhere. So before, this was just like a reflective surface, and the light would shine through here, like you just like use any kind of ambient light, and it would reflect and light up the screen. But we're replacing that reflectiveness with a panel that actually lights up. This is just a diffused panel with some LEDs in it. So we're going to remove this back panel. It's a reflective coating and a polarizer. The polarizer basically lines up the rays of light coming through to light up the pixels, and you can see how this changes colors. So this is the polarizing film. This is going to go in between this like a little sandwich. But first, let's open this up. We're going to use a razor blade in the top right corner here. And you want to make sure you're cutting through, you're kind of lifting up both the reflective surface and the polarizing film. So it's like two very, very thin layers on the back side. And you just want to barely get under there. You don't want to go too far. You don't need to go too far. And if you start just like peeling it a little bit with your fingers, you'll be able to see if you have both layers correctly. So it's not coming. I can see this is the reflective part, and this is the polarizing film. Seems like the polarizing film is really stuck on this one. So do your best just to get under there. See, yeah, there I go. I got the polarizing film now too. Okay, so with both of those lifted, you should be able to very cleanly pull, and you can see just how clean it's coming out. And again, be very careful just be very conscious of not putting pressure on this side of the ribbon. So it might be helpful to lay it down completely flat like this and just pull like this. Okay, so there's the polarizing film and the reflective film all in one. And this part is now just going to need to be cleaned pretty thoroughly. There's some sticky residue in this top corner where we first started, and again I'm just using some isopropyl alcohol. There doesn't seem to be any sticky residue anywhere else, but I'm just going to go ahead and clean the whole thing with this, and then I'm going to use a microfiber cloth to make sure it's nice and polished, no fingerprints. Okay, that's looking pretty good. There's definitely fingerprints and stuff on the front side here. So we'll clean that a little bit later, but the most important part to clean right now is the back side, because we don't want to have fingerprints in there when we put it back in the Game Boy. Okay, so now to get it back in the Game Boy, pretty much just the process in reverse. It goes on this side like this, folds down, and it's a good idea to use that little screw to kind of hold it in place. And then you want to align it kind of like this way. You can see it moves a little bit. So you just want to make sure all these pins are lined up perfectly. One of them got a little bit bent, so just bend it back into place. And then I'm going to use some normal flux this time. And there's probably already enough solder still left on there. I'm going to use my little pry tool here just to really make sure they're pressed down while I solder them back together. You want to be careful not to touch any of the plastic here, because it melts almost instantly when you touch it with your soldering iron. And always remember, in a pulling motion down from the thicker part down to where the edge of where the pins are. And then really make sure everything is cleaned up here, because it's going to be more difficult to clean once we close this all up. So then just fold this back into place. And get it lined up this way. Okay, and there's two screws here. I'm not going to put the screws in yet because we need to kind of lift it up a little bit to slide the polarizing film and backlight in place. So what I'm going to do is just the same thing here. Just make sure the pins are lined up nicely. And at this point it's a good idea to test it just to make sure that everything is still working. I'll carefully put it back in there. Okay. It's really hard to see when it's like this, but if you look at it in the very right angle and adjust the contrast, you can tell that it's working. So, looks good. And for now I'm going to go ahead and finish cleaning up everything. And then I'm going to reattach this, like the big staple thing that was here. Okay, so now the next step is just to install the backlight and polarizing film. This comes with some like a plastic film that you need to peel off, and it comes on both sides, so just go ahead and peel that off and get rid of that. Same thing on this side. You want to try to eliminate fingerprints as much as possible here, so try your best not to actually touch the film itself. And you can see how in one direction it's going to be dark and one direction is light. If you're not going to be biverting, then you want it to be light. If you're going to install a Bivert chip, then you want it to be dark. Because basically what this is doing is inverting the image, and this is going to invert it again. And by doing that, it somehow adds more contrast. So I do recommend biverting on DMGs. I think there's a pretty big benefit to it. Just way better contrast. So again, on the backlight panel here, some little film. I'm going to go ahead and quickly tin the little contacts right here. Just a little bit on each of those little pads. There you go. Okay, so you're going to lift up your screen very carefully and slide this inside. On some of them, you're going to have to cut little notches in this plastic frame. On this Handheld Legend one, this little like ribbon connector here can just like kind of fold right over it, so you don't really need to worry about that. I guess we'll go ahead and attach the two wires. Positives on the left. So attach your red wire there. And now slide that under your screen. Just like this. And let it fall right down into place. So now it's going to light up. But we still need the polarizing film. You want to make sure it's really, really clean. See, so this way it's kind of light, and this way it's kind of dark. So you want it to make sure that it's very dark. And you can already see there's some, it might be hard to see on camera, but like right here, there's a, it's going to be like a Newton ring. It's pretty easy to fix. We're going to add some cornstarch to this, and then that's going to add a very, very thin layer of like an air. So when it presses together, it can't move the polarization. It's just because when there's any kind of pressure that's uneven, the polarizing makes the light shine perfectly in one direction. But if it gets distorted in any way, then you start to see like the little Newton rings or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and add some cornstarch. So I showed this in another video, but this time I'm going to try using a paintbrush and just kind of paint it on. And then I like to use canned air to clean it off. And there we go. Get that into place. And no more Newton rings. Okay, so now at this point I'm going to go ahead and reinstall these two screws and the little clip thing here. Okay, so kind of bend the clip into shape first, and then you want to get the side that's not soldered in place first. Just kind of poke it through that little hole. So now just use your like little pry tool and push down on it and push it into place. So bend that into place and kind of pull the other side through. Make it nice and tight and then bend it down. It's just to add a little bit of protection so the pins don't get lifted. So not too big of a deal. Just double check to make sure everything is clean. This would be the time to finish cleaning it if it's not. If you need to clean on the inside, you can use something like a microfiber with something like this, and then kind of lift the screen and go underneath there to clean. But this looks pretty good. Make sure there's no dust. And okay, so now we need to attach these two wires to these two spots here on either side of this little capacitor, and some flux just to protect it a little bit. So positive on the left and negative on the right. And then what a lot of people I've seen do is you can take these wires and just like kind of shove them through where that capacitor is, the little hole, and that just cleans up the front side of the thing here, because there's a lot of space back here where these can go. So there is a backlit DMG screen. Next step is now to install the Bivert, and on the Bivert we do that on the back side of on the motherboard of the Game Boy. So this is pretty simple. Again, just add some flux to the little pads inside the little rings. And we're going to tin them. I'm going to keep these two kind of light because we're going to lift pins to go on top of them. And then this one here is the ground. So just attach the wire that it came with to here. And I like to have it go off in this direction so it doesn't get in the way. And now on the motherboard we're going to lift pins, if you count from the right, pins 6 and 7. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, these two right here. And sometimes it's easier to do it this way. Just get your knife under there. So there's pin 6 lifted. Okay. So here's pin 6 and 7 lifted. Okay, so with those two pins lifted, you want to slide this underneath those two pins, and then line up. You're going to line up these 3 holes with with this little thing here and these here, and it just kind of lines up really easily automatically for you. Once those 3 are lined up there, you can kind of hold it down and then push the pins back down onto the Bivert board, and because we're going to attach those to the 2 little pads there. And then for these 3 holes, you're just going to want to get your soldering iron in there and just really fill it up with some solder. Okay. Now these 2 pins, align them to the little pads, and then make sure they attach to the pads nicely. So this is how it should look so far. So the 2 pins are now attached there, and I've attached it in the middle, and now I need to fill in the last 2 holes. So again, just get your soldering iron, stick it in the hole, make sure it's nice and hot in there, and then just add some solder, and then really fill it up nice and good. Make sure it flows all the way through. Okay. So heat it up, we add a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit more to the middle one here too. Okay, just like that. And then the nearest ground point is this little pin right here. From the top right corner, it's the second one down. Typically I like to trim this wire so it's just the right size. Add some more solder to that pin just so to make the contact a little bit easier. So there we go. So now it should be biverted. Everything should be good to go. It's not necessary, but if you want, you can add a little bit of Kapton. So for now, I'm just going to leave it just like this and turn it on. And it looks really good. See the contrast? Very happy with how it turned out. So now, last steps are now to install this into the front of the shell. So here's the front of the shell. Get rid of all the stuff you don't need anymore. And first I'm going to go clean these buttons real quick. So now take your buttons and put them all into place. Just like that. And then get your board with the screen and slide that down into place. Make sure your speaker gets in there nicely. And turn it over, make sure see a hair. Okay, that looks good. So now we're going to screw this back down. And these are the Phillips screws. There's lots and lots of screws on DMGs. And you want to be careful with this one right here. I can see the two little wires from the backlight. So I think I'm going to leave this one empty. But I have one last screw to go right there. But it should be fine. Make sure everything's nice and feels nice and good. And then we're going to close this up one more time. Just like that. And then this is going to be the these silver tri-wing screws. Typically, I've seen DMGs come with both actually. So sometimes they have Phillips screws, and I think that was original. So kind of interesting. And on DMGs, you want to make sure you don't over tighten any of these. Just until they're a little bit firm, but you don't want to like jam them really hard together, because this is a pretty old thing. Okay, so it all looks like it's working really well. So now the last step is just to install the lens. And that's when you really want to make sure, get rid of all your dust, fingerprints. And that's it. Yeah, I guess thanks for watching, you guys. I'll leave links in the description to where you can get some of these parts, and links to our Discord, my Patreon, everything like that. So yeah, I guess I'll see you next time.